Hello everyone, welcome to BIM Talk presented by Bimcrone, Dorçe, Göktekin, Unity and Dome+Partners. My name is Ece. Before moving on to my guest, I want to remind you that you can write your questions anytime you want. I will be asking them to my guest. Today our topic is construction's big green secret. Matthew Jackson, Director of Business Development at BIMobject, will be explaining the secret. Matthew. Hello, Matthew.
Good evening. Hello.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Thank you. I'm good too. Thank you for accepting our invitation. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
So, can you introduce yourself briefly for our guests?
Yeah, of course. So my name is Matthew Jackson. I work as business director at BIMobject. I've been working for them for about 7 years now, but I'm educated as an architect. That's where I come from. Graduated a long time ago now, but living in the tech world, worked for Apple and Autodesk as well before moving here. So really excited and glad to be here. And I've just noticed a big dark cloud has come over. So I'm going to go and turn a light on so you can see me better because it's really dark. So just give me 2 seconds for that. There we go. That's better. It's always raining in Sweden. There we go. All right.
The weather was fine just a few minutes ago. I mean, it was okay. Turned bad. So I want to start with a basic question. Actually, we all use BIMobject families. We have an idea, but what is BIMobject and how did it start?
So the company's been around for quite a while, but the company has a really simple goal. We're aiming and trying to become like the world's marketplace, the world's central hub for BIM content, and more importantly, just information about the products you want to put into your buildings, presented in a way that you want to see the information as architects. It's a huge challenge. It's a really exciting company to work for. And it's a really exciting time to work in construction and digitization. So that's what we do.
Mm-hmm. So you said you have an architectural background, and how did you end up in BIMobject?
Well, I kind of, by accident and on purpose, I suppose. So I graduated during the financial crash back in 2007, 2008. I was working at the time, designing schools and hospitals, and I was moving companies. And I moved at exactly the wrong time. The company I was moving to, unfortunately, had 50% of their contracts cancelled because of the crash. And therefore I couldn't be employed. So I ended up moving into technology, working for Apple when AutoCAD for Mac was launched, which, wasn't a great product, but it's also when the iPad came out, and I got really excited about how technology can help transform an industry with new techniques. And then, of course, the big BIM thing came along. Worked for Autodesk for a while. Then ended up at BIMobject as a technical consultant. That's where I kind of started as an expert in BIM. So it's been a really fun few years. And I mean, I'm sure a lot of your viewers as well, like the industry is transforming itself. So it's a really exciting time to work in tech. In construction.
We are all interested in that subject, actually. I want to ask you, why does construction have a secret? The title is Construction's Big Green Secret. So this is actually the heart of
yes,
the
it is. So I'm really passionate about sustainability and being eco-friendly. So construction's big green secret isn't a positive one. It's actually a really negative one. And that is that we are the worst, one of the worst industries in the world. So if you watch the news or read newspapers, people are always complaining about airlines, right? Oh, you shouldn't fly. It's not eco-friendly. And correct, it's not eco-friendly at all. But flying produces around 13% of the global CO2 output. Construction and the built environment outputs around 35% of global output. And Well, yeah, it's nearly 3 times as much as flying. And we also produce about 40% of all solid waste. Now, what I mean by that is all the waste that we have to bury in the ground. So the big green secret is that nobody's talking about this really at all. It's a very complicated thing to discuss, and the media don't really discuss it. And we are all responsible for it, right? So you as architects, and engineers and contractors, and us as people who do tech, we are all part of the industry, and therefore we share a joint responsibility of being like, hold on, everyone tells me in the media that flying is really bad, but actually it's the industry I work in that's really bad. Why are we not talking about this more broadly? So that's the big secret. It's not a positive secret, but the other part of the secret is that it's fixable and solvable. I mean, that's the important thing.
So we actually need to see the bigger problems, and how can we fix it? What is your suggestion for it?
So one of the reasons that I'm working at BIMobject is I believe that we are building buildings without really understanding what we're building them with. And I can honestly say this when I worked as an architect, right? So, if you're designing a school, you place your windows and your chairs, your doors, and your air conditioning, but you don't really have too much of a discussion about what that actually is. It's a window, but you don't know who's made that window and what its performance properties are. And one of the really exciting things about working for BIMobject is we want architects to understand what the performance properties are of everything that you design with, because then as architects, designers, engineers, you can make really good decisions about creating more sustainable buildings for the future. I mean, it's not rocket science, but the reason that this is really difficult is that you're talking about hundreds of thousands, millions, hundreds of millions of products, which we need to bring to you so you can make good choices around design. And one of the things that I think people forget is that we design a building and then we build a building. But that building, one of the coolest things about working construction is it's one of the only industries where you have an impact on humanity probably past your professional life. You design buildings today, which is going to be built after you retire, probably. That's really cool. But you have to think that that building is going to be using electricity. It needs to be heated, it needs to be cooled. It has to use water. It has to be maintained. The humans go through it. And we have to be really smart about how we do that. And right now, we're really not very good at maintaining buildings and running buildings at all. As a global population, there is not many good examples around the world. So that's kind of, goes back to your first question. What does BIMobject do, and why do I work for BIMobject? Well, this is kind of why I feel that we can empower architects to make really good choices. And then you guys can make really good buildings for the future. And that's really exciting. That's genuinely really exciting.
Thank you. I mean, thank you for reminding us actually that, we have impact on people's lives. So sometimes we are all dragged with the workload and everything, but it's good to remind that.
I mean, being an architect is one of the coolest jobs in the world. It's so cool.
It's good to remember. Thank you. Just so I want to ask you something. What do you think about mass manufacturing, mass building production as an architect and as an environmentalist? I just want to.
So that is a great question. So I 100% support it for a number of reasons. So
sorry, I interrupted. It is really hard to say this as an architect. Architects always think that they need to make special designs for every place and so on.
So my approach to this is that there's a balance in the middle. So I was really fortunate enough to work with the Department of Education in the UK for a while. I also worked with the Ministry of Justice for a while as well. So I talked about designing schools and prisons. Quite boring. But one of the really good questions as somebody who worked in technology, I asked the architects, why do you redesign a classroom for 30 students every time? The government knows what they want in a classroom. They want 30 desks, 30 chairs, some lockers, a desk, a board, so the teacher can do their work. So why would an architect redesign a classroom every time? Well, we could build that classroom in a factory or bits of it in a factory and deliver it on site. What the architect should do, I believe, is the architect should spend more time and effort in understanding the site, understanding the city, understanding how you move through a building, how a person interacts with the spaces, things like the entrance lobby and the shared spaces. So shared space is so important, like the cafeterias, the play spaces, and those sorts of things. So one of the things where, like, I think a lot of architects are really worried about this, but actually I think you will get more design freedom to spend more time to concentrate on the things that matter. And that is space and interaction with space. The layout of a classroom to you is not important. Like, it's already been decided by your clients. Yeah, and by standards. And the same goes for everything: supermarkets, housing, and all that stuff. And one of the really good questions as well that I always ask is that if you had 6 8-dot Lego bricks, how many? I'm going to ask you the question: how many different ways do you think I can arrange 6 Lego bricks? So it's 6 standard bricks. Go and guess. How many ways do you think I can arrange it?
Arrange it to make a wall or something.
Yeah. So arrange the bricks. So it's over 9 million times.
Oh, okay.
So you can arrange Lego bricks, just 6 of them, right? So I actually believe that you still get a lot of design freedom. You still get to decide how those spaces are arranged. But then the advantages as an environmentalist is we can build buildings in pieces in factories, control it. It's faster. You spend less time on site. The logistics are cheaper. And we're already doing it in parts of Scandinavia, in parts of the UK. Student housing, I think it started in the Netherlands. Student housing has been built that way for 10 years. It's just built as blocks and just stacked. Does it look great? No. Does it serve its purpose? Yes. So I think there's a middle ground. I think architects should definitely still get involved and do that. So yeah.
To manage that, digitalization is quite important, actually. Like, is it a solution to everything? And I want to ask one more thing. Tuberk is asking, what are the challenges of the industry with becoming digital?
Great question, Tuberk. Good evening to you. I think the biggest challenge is education. I think the technology, most of the technology already exists. Fundamentally, I mean, us as a company, BIMobject, of course, we're evolving all of the time. But if you look at a lot of the drawing software we use, a lot of the 4D, 5D tech we use, it's kind of just slowly evolving. I think the biggest thing is just education and learning and collaboration as well. I mean, architects and engineers and the supply chain now have to work really close together. And I think there's still some challenges in there, and that's just time. Time will solve that. So I think education is it's a good time to make money, like running a school.
Don't you think we are a little bit late? I mean, comparing to the other industries, all the other industries have developed a lot. They digitalize more quickly, but we are late. Maybe starting with the BIM, this process has started, but still, I don't know. I feel late.
Well, I think you're completely right, but I think it's not completely unfair though. If you look at the manufacturing industry that digitized back in the 1980s and had their big efficiency gains, when you build a car, it's kind of, you have a finite number of things that you're doing, and also you build a car in a factory and then place that car in the outside world. The same way you build everything. I think the big challenge that we have in construction is that we have to go to the place it's being built. We have to go that way around. So you basically have to build a factory in every single, you know, in the old-fashioned way, every single place that you go to. And there's huge challenges with that, especially in a city. So I think that's been the big challenge for us as an industry, and still is a big challenge, is that it is difficult, but also it goes back to education as well. So globally, construction employs 275 million people. The majority of those people work outdoors with hard hats and jackets. Most of them are not university educated. They do the most amazing work. They build the world that we live in. So it goes back to that. I think it's very much to do with education across a very broad amount of people. That's a lot of people to educate, 275 million.
Yeah. So actually, still the same answer, education.
Yeah, definitely.
Besides digitalization, I find standardization very important. In our previous conversation, you remember we talked about, you know, changing the project drawing standards according to the pleasure of the people and so on. I know it's a utopia for now, but is a single standard possible for all countries, all cities, and even municipalities? What do you think about the future of it?
Well, I know they've just launched ISO 19650. If you want something quite boring to read, go and read a standard. They are really hard to read. I have read some of the parts. I think the standards we should be talking about goes to the standards and the way that we communicate and work together. I think it's, you know, we all work in different languages. We have different needs. You know, we have different geographies. You know, you can't build so going back to your factory question, which I think is quite good, you can't build one type of school and ship it all over the world. The weather that you have where you are in Ankara is very different to the weather that I have here in Sweden. And in fact, even in Sweden, the weather I have here at the south of Sweden is very different to the weather I have in the north of Sweden. So the buildings I have to build have to be different to suit the need of where they are. But I think standard of the way we talk to each other is possible. So the way that we pass data to each other, who is responsible for that data? So I believe that the manufacturers know their products the best, so they should tell us about their products. The architects know about the design the best, so they should own the data about the design. The engineers know about how it's going to go together. And so these sorts of things. I think standards in communication and data, yes. Standards in design, I don't think that's possible beyond a country or a region or a climate group, maybe. Because I understand that there are challenges.
There's a related question about this. Aicha is asking, do companies contact you before producing their BIM objects? Are you giving them any suggestions, you know, according to architect's need or engineer's need?
Yes and no. We do get companies coming to us who have BIM objects already. They may have been produced by a third party. Some of them produce themselves. In fact, some architects do it as well as for, you know, for companies. But the majority, I say, still the majority come before. So we go through a consultation process to understand their product. We understand what's important, and we understand how they want to communicate about their product. But then, of course, we understand the architect's needs too. So we have the classic conversation where it might be a furniture company or a sanitary company. They make this beautiful design. They've spent so long creating it. And they go, I want it to look beautiful inside an architect's model. And we have to be really polite and say, okay, but like, you know, it can't be 100 megabytes in size. Like, Like, it's really important that we have to create a representation of that product. We can't make it millimeter accurate. And here's why. We explain them. This is how an architect works. This is why they want it that way. So we try our best to find the right approach for it. And I've been on many of those conversations, and it's really fun because they really care about their products. They make some amazing things, and you have to make them understand that they can't, architects need it their way too.
Okay, then there's another question. We are moving on to the architectural side, actually. How will expectations from architects change in the future? Our world is changing, the way we design is changing, the tools we use are changing.
I think as architects, I think you hold the keys to a really exciting future. I mean, I think that I'm very lucky, and I lecture at a couple of universities with architecture students in Copenhagen and here in south of Sweden. And I do remind people, like, as I said earlier, architecture is really exciting, right? So you have impact on your design for future generations. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of people have forgotten this. Like, people just go, I want to build some buildings, build them as cheap as possible and fast as possible. And architects, of course, you're stuck in a very difficult position where you want to produce an amazing design, but at the same time, you're very limited by the scope that you get from the client. Apart from, like, if you're really lucky, you might work for Zaha, and Zaha practice and do the Beijing, Olympic Stadium, or those really exciting projects. But actually, going back to the sustainability question, then, if construction and buildings produce 35% of CO2 and 40% of solid waste, what is the group of people that can probably impact that the most? And I would say it's architects, because you decide on the design of a building, and you should be encouraging your clients to understand, if I design it this way, I will save 10% energy over 50 years because I've used these materials and I've designed this shape. And only the architects can do that. If you talk to the client about saving money over time by being more energy efficient and sustainable, you can convince the clients and the governments to go, not only can I produce you a really good building, I can make this building cost you less money over time because it's going to be better. And I would say that it's architects that have that power. And I think that's super cool. And I'm slightly jealous, but I do like working in tech. So I think you guys should definitely be doing it.
I mean, comparing to the Turkey with the UK, I'm gonna give this example. I studied in the UK, actually. Like,
cool.
In Turkey, architects do not consider, sustainability issues. They think it's an engineering issue. Like, we don't calculate the CO2 emissions and so on. It's some mechanical engineer's job. This is what they think in Turkey. In the UK, I know many architectural firms consider sustainability consultants in their firms. So it's a kind of different approach. I guess this is one of the major things that's affecting we are not trying to change the client's opinion because we don't have a sustainability consultant and so on.
I mean, I think it's shared responsibility. Of course, the engineer is in charge, of course, doing the calculations and the simulations from a technical point of view, but the shape of a building, the shape of a room, the shape of the spaces, the arrangement of the spaces, the way the space is used, what order it's used in, all has huge impacts on the energy resources which go into a building. Really simple things. The size and orientation of a window has huge impact when it comes to solar gain, evening cooling, exposed cold bridging, all those really technical things that we talk about. And yeah, I mean, an engineer absolutely should do it too. But I think definitely as architects, you definitely have a position to influence that area, for sure.
I mean, still we need to use at least the passive sustainable strategies. I'm not talking about the active ones, but still we need to actually think of it during the design. I want
Yep.
to ask you about the certification system, LEED, BREEAM,
Mhm.
WOW, and so on. What do you think about them?
So I'm actually in the middle of writing some blog posts about these things. I'm gonna hopefully. This is like I haven't told anybody this. I'm gonna do some articles about this. I've been asked by a publication. I think they're good. I think they're good and bad. So I think the good thing about LEED and BREEAM is it makes us think about buildings from a green point of view. But I really want them to be more ambitious. I mean, I think LEED Platinum should be only awarded to a building that has a carbon positive output. So by that I mean it reduces the carbon in the air, so it eats it or produces its own electricity or whatever. So I think we should be a lot more ambitious, but I think they're a good starting point, and I think that they are a measurement. But I want to see things like much more broad certification on products. I want it to go down. So I mean, I understand a building, but a building is made up of all the pieces. So no, on fridges we've had the A, B, C, D grading for electricity for years. You have EPDs, so environmental product declarations for products. So that means I have an understanding of carbon and waste when a product is made or is running or anything like that. So yeah, I mean, at a building level, I think it's good, but I want to see it much more broadly, globally used on product levels as well, because your building is made of products. So if you choose bad products, you're going to get a bad performing building, and you need to look at all of the products, and again, this is something that at BIMobject we take really seriously and are exploring very heavily. Like, how do you identify good products to make good buildings based on your location? Like, that's a huge question that we have to consider, and it's very exciting again.
Of course. One last question from our audience. Janan has an interesting question. What do you think about city information modeling? We always talk about BIM in a building scale, but in a city scale, what do you think?
I was asked this question at another conference, and I said, "Isn't this just smart cities? Isn't this just like a rebranding of smart cities to sell more software?" But on a serious note, I think it's really important. So I'm going to give you a really good example. So in Copenhagen, they have a street in Copenhagen, which it's a very busy street. It's in the middle of the city. It's just off Gågaten, which is their main shopping street. And on that street, they have lots of sensors. So they have things like traffic sensors, temperature sensors, wind, air pollution. It counts the amount of people. It counts the amount of cars. It counts the light. It counts everything along that street. And what they do is they make that information public, that data set public. And they invite the architecture, engineering, and construction communities and startups to go, how can you make my city better with this as an example set of information, how my city is used? So city information modeling for me is, how do we get all the buildings and all the spaces to talk to each other so we can optimize the city from a sustainability point of view, but also from a health and safety point of view, understanding things like traffic, understanding things like crime, understanding things like how people move throughout a city, light, heating, all those things. So yeah, I think if we can get building information modeling right, and then digital twins, right, which we haven't spoken about at all, but basically the digital maintenance of structures, how do we then get all those buildings to talk to each other, and all the roads, and all the sewage and the water and the travel, to create this great model so a municipality can create a very efficient working model. There's some examples where it's kind of being done. So in the United Kingdom, they're trying to create a complete digital model of all the motorways with sensors to understand how the motorways are working. In Singapore, they're trying to create, and traffic in the UK is awful. They're trying to create, obviously, the digital model of Singapore. They've been trying for many years. It's very difficult, very highly densely populated city, a lot of kind of older buildings as well as new buildings that just pop up out of nowhere. So again, big challenge. So I think it's really interesting, and I think it is a massive step towards understanding really how cities work, and make them better for people. I mean, that's why we're all here, right? I mean, we work in architecture to create impacts for people, and I think if you're not doing it to make people's lives better, then I don't understand why you would do it. That's kind of my approach, like my humanity hat on there.
Of course. I mean, we exceeded our time actually, but still, I want to ask you one last question.
Of course,
What is our personal responsibility for going green?
That's a good question, because obviously we read all the time about like how you should like walk to work more and those sorts of things. So I stole this from a VC, and he made a really good point. There's 4 big ways that we can impact the world. So the 4 big ways we can impact the world. The first one is what we buy. So if you want to only buy vegetarian food, or if you want to buy a Tesla, good for you. That's good. You're making a positive impact on the world. If you want to buy less meat, that's good. You're making a positive impact on the world, and you should do that 100%. No one is saying you shouldn't do so. So that's good. What we buy is important. Don't buy too many clothes, those sort of things. The second one then is who you vote for. So we're not going to talk about politics, but who you vote for is really important too. If you care about these things, like, you should think about who you vote for. The third one, again, this isn't true for around the world, because unfortunately you don't have this power, but your ability to protest. Now, protest doesn't have to be protesting in the streets. That's not what we mean. Protest like, I'm not going to buy that, or I refuse to buy that, or I refuse to buy those products. You can protest against corporations too. But the fourth one, the most important one, is who you work for. So because the first 3 kind of have impacts on yourself and they're kind of personal choice. But the fourth one, especially as architects, you have an impact on the wider world of people who are not architects, who are going to live in the buildings and work in the buildings you design. And if you really care about something, but you work for a company that doesn't positively impact that, then if you can, and of course, if you're fortunate enough to, either A, change that company, or change job to a company that does care. Because, if you want to create a positive spin on the world, then who you work for is worth 10 times more than all those other 3 are combined, because you have a huge external impact, especially in construction, on, hey, if there's an architecture practice or construction practice that only wants to build 100% eco-friendly buildings, then that's who you're going to work for. And those companies, in the long run, those companies will probably win the whatever race we're trying to race. So, race to save the world, is that what we're doing? So yeah, it's quite philosophical answer to a question, and I appreciate that. And I appreciate that it's very different for all individuals. We're just coming out of a terrible, terrible pandemic. And, we all have to be really careful and those sorts of things.
I guess there's a problem with the voice. Sorry, I'm having difficulty with hearing, but
can everyone hear me okay? I can hear you fine.
So sorry, I'm just gonna reset this.
That's okay. I can hear. I can keep talking for the audience. If anyone has any more questions, I can stay online. But it's late.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine. I'm doing thumbs up.
Okay, I'm gonna try like that. I guess you can't
I
hear
can
me.
still hear you. I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, now it is
Yep.
working. Now it is working. Sorry.
It's late. It's late. It's late. The headphones are like, I've had enough work for the day. I want to go to bed. Headphones. That's what the headphones are saying.
Sorry for this problem. I mean, I was
No,
gonna
it's
say
fine.
you're right, and these are really important points, and we should stop ignoring, especially the last part you mentioned. I mean, who we work for, like what we are doing, what are we part of the system. These are quite important. Thank you for sharing with us. I mean, do you want to add anything?
Just look. I mean, if you've enjoyed, come and find me on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter too, but also, for you guys as designers, come and use BIMobject. It's free. Come and give us feedback. Tell us what you're missing. We're trying to build this huge global database, and it's super fun, but at the same time, it's a huge challenge, and I love to hear feedback. Please send me feedback by LinkedIn on what you think is good and bad about what we do. It's free for you to use. You can just go to BIMobject now and use it for free as architects and engineers. And yeah, just communicate. Follow me on LinkedIn, and I really hope that once the world opens up, we can do a face-to-face kind of event and stuff, and that'd be really fantastic to meet you all.
Hopefully. Thank you so much. Thank you for accepting our invitation.
Thank you.
Again. Hope to do another broadcast with you again.
Yep. Let me know when and where. And everybody have a wonderful evening and a great rest of the week.
Have a nice evening then.
Thank you.